A touching incident which occurred in 1894 may be told here. It shows the high respect in which some of the ladies of Cambridge, Massachusetts, held the Swami and his mother. The Swami one day spoke to them about the ideals of Indian women, particularly stressing the ideal of Indian motherhood. They were greatly moved. So the following Christmas, they sent the Swami's mother in India a letter together with a beautiful picture of the child Jesus on the lap of the Virgin Mary. They wrote in the letter, "At this Christmas tide, when the gift of Mary's Son to the world is celebrated and rejoiced over with us, it would seem the time of remembrance. We, who have your Son in our midst, send you greetings. His generous service to men, women, and children in our midst was laid at your feet by him. In an address he gave us the other day on the ideals of motherhood in India. The worship of his mother will be to all who heard him an inspiration and an upliftment." The Swami often spoke to his disciples about his mother's wonderful self-control and on how on one occasion she had gone without food for 14 days. He acknowledged that her character was a constant inspiration to his life and work. The love and adoration in which the Swami was held by his Western disciples can hardly be overemphasized. Some described him as the lordly monk, and some as a grand seigneur. Mrs. Leggett said that in all her experience she had met only two celebrated personages who could make one feel perfectly at ease without for an instant losing their own dignity, and one of them was Swami Vivekananda. Margaret Noble, the future Sister Nivedita, described him aptly as a Plato in thought and a modern Savonarola in his fearless outspokenness. William James of Harvard addressed the Swami as master and referred to him in his book Varieties of Religious Experience as a paragon of Vedantists. A pleasant surprise awaited Swami Vivekananda on his arrival in London. Swami Saradananda had already come and was staying as the guest of Mr. Sturdy. The two Swamis had not seen each other in a very long time. Swami Vivekananda was told all the news of his spiritual brothers at the Alambazar monastery and their activities in India. It was a most happy occasion. Swami Vivekananda soon plunged into a whirlwind of activity. From the beginning of May, he conducted 5 classes a week and a Friday session for open discussion. He gave a series of 3 Sunday lectures in one of the galleries of the Royal Institute of Painters in Watercolors in Piccadilly, and also lectured at the Prince's Hall and the Lodge of Annie Besant, in addition to speaking at many clubs and in educational institutions and drawing rooms. His audiences consisted mostly of intellectual and serious-minded people. His speeches on jnana yoga, containing the essence of the Vedanta philosophy, were mostly given in England. Canon Wilberforce held a reception in the Swami's honor, to which he invited many distinguished people. At one of the meetings, at the close of his address, a white-haired and well-known philosopher said to the Swami, "You have spoken splendidly, sir, but you have told us nothing new." Quick came the Swami's reply, "Sir, I have told you the truth, that the truth is as old as the immemorial hills, as old as humanity, as old as creation, as old as the great God. Still, I have told you in such words as will make you think, make you live up to your thinking. Do I not do it well in telling it?" Loud applause greeted him at the end of these remarks. The Swami was quick in repartee. During the question period, a man who happened to be a native of Scotland asked, "What is the difference between a babu and a baboon?" And the instantaneous reply of the Swami, "Oh, not much. It is like the difference between a sot and a Scot, just the difference of a letter." In one of his public lectures in England, he paid the most touching tribute to his master, Sri Ramakrishna. He said that he had not one little word of his own to utter, not one infinitesimal thought of his own to unfold. Everything, every single thing, all that he was himself, all that he could be to others, all that he might do for the world, came from that single source, from that pure soul, from that illimitable inspiration, from him who, seated there in my beloved India, had solved the tremendous secret and bestowed the solution on all, ungrudgingly and with divine prodigality. The Swami's own self was utterly forgotten, altogether ignored. He said, "I am what I am, and what I am is always due to him. Whatever in me or in my words is good and true and eternal came to me from his mouth, his heart, his soul." Sri Ramakrishna is the spring of this phase of the earth's religious life, of its impulses and activities. If I can show the world one glimpse of my master, I shall not have lived in vain. It was Ramakrishna who brought him in contact with Max Muller, the great German Sanskritist and Indologist, who had been impressed by the eloquence of Keshav Chandra Sen and his religious fervor, and had also come to know of the influence that Sri Ramakrishna had exerted in the development of Keshav's life. From the information that he had been able to gather from India, Max Muller had already published an article on Ramakrishna in the magazine 19th Century, entitled "A Real Mahatma." Now Muller was eager to meet a direct disciple of the Master and invited Swami Vivekananda to lunch with him in Oxford on 28th May, 1896. The Swami was delighted to meet the savant. When the name of Ramakrishna was mentioned, the Swami said, "He is worshipped by thousands today, Professor." And Max Muller's reply was, "To whom else shall worship be accorded, if not to such?" Regarding Max Muller and his wife, Swami Vivekananda later wrote, "The visit was really a revelation to me. That little white house, its setting in a beautiful garden, the silver-haired sage with a face calm and benign, and a forehead smooth as a child's in spite of 70 winters, and every line in that face speaking of a deep-seated mine of spirituality somewhere behind. And that noble wife, the helpmate of his life through his long and arduous task of exciting interest, overriding opposition and contempt, and at last creating a respect for the thoughts of the sages of ancient India. Oh, the trees, flowers, and calmness and clear sky, all these sent me back in imagination to the glorious days of ancient India, the days of our Brahmarshis and Rajarshis, the days of the Vanaprasthas and Arudatis and Vasistas. It was neither the philologist nor the scholar that I saw, but a soul that is every day realizing its oneness with the universe." Swami Vivekananda was deeply affected to see Max Muller's love for India. He wrote, "I wish I had 100th part of that love for my motherland. Endowed with an extraordinary and at the same time an intensely active mind, he has lived and moved in the world of Indian thought for 50 years or more, and watched the sharp interchange of light and shadow in the interminable forest of Sanskrit literature with deep interest and heartfelt love, till they have sunk into the very soul and colored his whole being. The Swami asked Max Muller, "When are you coming to India? All men there would welcome one who has done so much to place the thoughts of their ancestors in a true light." At that, the face of the aged sage brightened up. There was almost a tear in his eye, a gentle nodding of the head, and slowly the words came out. "I would not return then. You would have to cremate me there." Further questions on the Swami's part seemed an unwarranted intrusion into the realms wherein were stored the holy secrets of a man's heart. Max Muller asked the Swami, "What are you doing to make Sri Ramakrishna known to the world?" Muller himself was eager to write a fuller biography of the Master if he could only procure the necessary materials. At Vivekananda's request, Swami Saradananda wrote down the sayings of Sri Ramakrishna and the facts of his life. Later, Max Muller embodied these in his book, The Life and Sayings of Sri Ramakrishna. One day, Saradananda asked Swami Vivekananda why he himself had not written about the Master's life for Max Muller. And Vivekananda answered, "I have such deep feeling for the Master that it is impossible for me to write about him for the public. If I had written the article Max Muller wanted, then I would have proved, quoting from philosophies, scriptures, and holy books of the Christians, that Ramakrishna was the greatest of all prophets born in this world. And that would have been too much for the old man. You have not thought so deeply about the Master as I have. Hence you could write in a way that would satisfy Max Muller. Therefore I ask you to write." Max Muller showed the Swami several colleges in Oxford and the Bodleian Library, and at last accompanied him to the railroad station. To the Swami's protest that the professor should not take such trouble, Muller said, "It is not every day that one meets with a disciple of Ramakrishna Paramahansa." Besides doing an intensive public work in England, the Swami made there some important personal contacts. The names of Goodwin Henrietta Muller, Margaret Noble, the future Sister Devi-The, and Sturdy have already been mentioned. These knew him intimately during his second visit and had become his disciples. Now came the turn of Captain and Mrs. Sevier. The captain was a retired officer of the English Army, 49 years old, and had served for many years in India. Both were earnest students of religion and had sought the highest truth in various sects and creeds, but had not found it anywhere. When they heard Swami Vivekananda, they intuitively realized that his teachings were what they had so long sought. They were deeply impressed by the non-dualistic philosophy of India and the Swami's personality. Coming out of one of the Swami's lectures, Captain Sevier asked Miss Josephine MacLeod, who had already known the Swami in America, "You know this young man? Is he what he seems?" "Yes." "In that case, one must follow him, and with him find God." The captain went to his wife and said, "Will you let me become the Swami's disciple?" "Yes," she replied. And then she asked him, "Will you let me become the Swami's disciple?" And he replied with affectionate humor, "I am not so sure." The very first time the Swami met Mrs. Sevier in private, he addressed her as Mother and asked her if she would not like to come to India, adding, I will give you my best realizations. A very affectionate relationship sprang up between the Swami and the Seviers, and they regarded him as their son. They became his intimate companions and offered him all their savings. But the Swami, anxious about their future worldly security, persuaded them to keep the greater portion of their fortune. Captain and Mrs. Sevier, together with Miss Noble and Goodwin, were the choicest among the followers that Swami Vivekananda gathered in England, and all of them remained faithful to him and his work till the last days of their lives. Through the generosity of the Seviers, Swami Vivekananda, as will be seen, established the Advaita Ashrama at Mayavati, an almost inaccessible place in the Himalayas, for the training of the disciples, both Eastern and Western, in the contemplation of the impersonal Godhead. After Captain Sevier's death at Mayavati, Mrs. Sevier lived there for 15 years, busying herself with the education of the children of the neighboring hills. Once Miss Josephine MacLeod asked her, "Do you not get bored?" And she replied, referring to Swami Vivekananda, "I think of him." Though preoccupied with various activities in England, the Swami never for one moment forgot his work in India. After all, it was his intense desire to find means to ameliorate the condition of his countrymen that had brought him to the West. That hope he always cherished in the corner of his mind, both in Europe and in America. He had to train his brother disciples as future workers in India, and so he is seen writing to them in detail regarding the organization of the monastery at Alambazar, where they had been living for some time. On 27th April 1896, the Swami sent instructions about the daily life of the monks, their food and clothing, and the way they were to engage with the public, and about provisions of a spacious library at the monastery, smaller room for interviews, a big hall for religious discussions with the devotees, a small office room, and so forth. He advised them to furnish the rooms in the simplest manner and to keep an eye on the water for drinking and cooking. The monastery, he suggested, should be under the management of a president and secretary to be elected by turns of vote. Study, preaching, religious practices should be important items among the duties of the inmates, he said. The Swami also desired to establish a muth for women directly under control of the Holy Mother, Sarada, Ramakrishna's spiritual wife. The monks were not to visit the women's quarters. In conclusion, he recommended Swami Brahmananda as the first president of the muth and said, "He who is the servant of all is their true master. He never becomes a leader in whose love there is a consideration of high or low. He whose love knows no end and never stops to consider high or low has the whole world lying at his feet." For his workers, the Swami wanted men with, as he said, muscles of iron and nerves of steel, inside which dwells a mind of the same material as that of which the thunderbolt is made. "I want strength, manhood, the virility of a warrior, and the radiance of a Brahmin. These men will stand aside from the world, give their lives, and be ready to fight the battle of truth, marching on from country to country. One blow struck outside of India is equal to 100,000 struck within. Well, all will come if the Lord wills it.